host for today's day-long online commemorations is a small nonprofit organization whose mission is to honor and preserve the national memory of World War II and to create the next greatest generation of tomorrow. The ceremonies taking place throughout the day today are part of the Friends' 4-year World War II 75th Anniversary Commemoration, which began on Pearl Harbor Day 2016. Friends is the only organization to have hosted a full 4-year 75th anniversary tribute, marking every major battle in which American troops participated during World War II.
Lord, please be honored here as we present our gratitude to you and also to the sacrificial heroes of the United States and Allied forces in influencing the demise of Axis powers in the Pacific Theater. As we in the U.S. officially recognize this victory by the signing of surrender by representatives of the Empire of Japan on the USS Missouri 75 years ago today, may we rejoice in this action as it officially ended the deadliest and most expansive set of hostilities that humans have ever experienced on planet Earth, and thus finalizing World War II. May heroes, their supporters, consisting of family members and friends, and their progeny be blessed on account of their sacrifices made to foil the tyrannical plans of a potentially one-world dominating government which was primarily led by the National Socialist Workers' Party, otherwise known of as the Nazi Party, and co-joining powers. May the events of this commemoration, which is so fittingly performed on the 75th anniversary, be honorable, meaningful, and historically informative. I pray this in the name above all names. Amen.
We commemorate on the 2nd of September the signing on the deck of the USS Missouri in Tokyo Bay of the surrender instrument by which the Imperial Japanese Empire surrendered to the United States. We were represented principally by General Douglas MacArthur, the senior Army officer in the Pacific, and Fleet Admiral Chester Nimitz. The achievement of a surrender was long and controversial. The decision made in Japan was much controverted, and there was much worry, I guess I can call it that, of continued opposition to the surrender by various detached organizations of the Japanese Army in different parts of the Pacific. That did not happen, and of course the surrender was signed and eventually observed officially through Switzerland a few days later, and that was the end of the war. We remember, we commemorate soldiers and Marines who served and died there. Those are the people that we honor and remember today. And to use a quotation of Winston Churchill, succeeding generations must not be allowed to forget these triumphs and the sacrifices made by the citizens and soldiers who prosecuted them.
My name is Jeff Reinbold, and it is my honor to serve as the Superintendent of National Mall and Memorial Parks here in the nation's capital. It is a pleasure to speak with you from the World War II Memorial, one of the many memorials under the care of the National Park Service. They commemorate our nation's military legacy and honor the veterans of our armed conflicts. This year marks the 75th anniversary of the end of World War II, and VJ Day marks the final commemoration of those milestone observances. This year may be one of our final opportunities at a major anniversary to honor and thank the World War II veterans and their families in person. It was a very difficult decision to cancel this year's VJ Day observance. We know how many people share our great disappointment in not being able to gather here to properly honor the fallen from World War II, especially as we mark 75 years since the war's end. We are indebted to the Friends of the National World War II Memorial, our partner in the care of this special place, for providing this virtual forum. And we thank the Friends, and we share in their mission to ensure that the legacy and sacrifices of World War II veterans are not forgotten. More than 4 million visitors come to the memorial each year. Thank you to the volunteers and National Park Service staff who care for this magnificent place. The pride you take in your work is apparent to us all. I know how difficult it has been for you to be away from here, especially with the observance of so many important anniversaries. I truly look forward to welcoming you back when it is safe to do so. The surrender ceremony aboard the USS Missouri on September 2nd, 1945. General Douglas MacArthur said, "It is my earnest hope, indeed the hope of all mankind, that from this solemn occasion a better world shall emerge out of the blood and carnage of the past. A world founded upon faith and understanding. A world dedicated to the dignity of man and the fulfillment of his most cherished wish for freedom, tolerance, and justice. In a world still struggling to achieve universal peace and understanding, herein lies the relevance of history and the power of our nation's sacred memorials. These places are not merely granite and marble reminders of those heroic deeds, of the men and women who fought and struggled and ultimately were victorious. They remind us that extraordinary things can come from people with otherwise ordinary lives. They help us understand the monumental trials and sacrifices that have shaped our nation, our government, and our society. And they remind us not only of what we can achieve when we work together as a nation, but also of the work that remains to be completed. The National Park Service is proud to be the steward of this memorial and of their legacy. Know that we will be here every day of every year, watching over this place to keep it and protect it with all the reverence it demands. Thank you.
On September 2nd, 1945, aboard the USS Missouri, anchored in Tokyo Bay, Allied and Japanese officers signed the terms of Japanese surrender, a day now remembered as Victory over Japan Day or VJ Day. Japan's capitulation ended 6 years of hostilities and bloodshed, officially concluding the war. Through the 1930s, Japan's imperial expansion, enabled by its modernized and formidable navy, posed a serious threat in the Pacific. On December 7, 1941, tensions boiled over when Japan attacked the American fleet at Pearl Harbor. Shortly after this raid, Japan launched similar attacks on American forces on Guam, Wake Island, and the Philippines, each of which fell by mid-1942. Before long, Japan had claimed a huge collection of nations and islands under its new empire, and its powerful navy secured its reach. America and its allies now had two theaters of war to worry about, and images of Japanese brutality against captured Americans gave this new fight a sense of urgency. With the Japanese fleet seemingly unstoppable, Allied forces in the Pacific reorganized and regrouped, looking for a way to halt this advance and regain ground. Fortunately, Japanese actions to capture Midway Atoll in June 1942 were quelled with a decisive American victory that sank Japan's 4 carriers and several other vessels before forcing the remaining fleet to retreat. This battle was a monumental turning point that effectively halted Japanese expansion by significantly crippling Japan's naval strength and reducing the number of carriers and skilled pilots. With Japan's momentum halted, the Allies seized the initiative and launched an amphibious assault on Guadalcanal, which ultimately repelled Japanese aggression in the Solomon Islands. From there, the Allies launched an island-hopping campaign, a series of amphibious assaults aimed to bring American forces closer to Japan and the occupied Philippines by capturing strategic islands along the way and leapfrogging others to efficiently gain the most useful ground with less bloodshed. Tarawa was the first target, an assault that ended in an American victory, but at an astounding cost over its 4-day duration. Using the lessons learned at Tarawa, hard-fought victories in the Marshall Islands, Mariana Islands, and the Palau Islands through 1944 brought Allied forces ever closer to their ultimate objectives. With every victory on land, American forces secured greater air and naval superiority, yet casualties still climbed. In October, Allied forces began amphibious operations to liberate the Philippines, a task that would take 10 months to complete. Allied forces elsewhere, meanwhile, continued to leapfrog closer to mainland Japan into 1945. American Air Forces, spearheaded by the new long-range B-29 Superfortress, began a strategic bombing campaign against Japan. Tough amphibious operations in the spring of 1945 captured the islands of Iwo Jima and later Okinawa, each an important stepping stone for an invasion of the Japanese mainland. Despite its rapid loss of military and imperial strength, as well as its besiegement under Allied strategic bombing, Japanese forces did not surrender, and American military leaders began to debate the necessity and human cost of an amphibious assault on Japan itself. Instead, on August 6, 1945, an American B-29 dropped the first atomic bomb on the Japanese city of Hiroshima, causing catastrophic damage to the city and shocking the world. On August 9th, another B-29 dropped a second bomb on Nagasaki, just one day after the Soviet Union, no longer at war with a defeated Germany, invaded occupied Manchuria. At last, Japan had had enough. After a few days of diplomatic assurances of the post-war structure, on August 14th, August 15th in Japan, Japanese leaders agreed to surrender, and Emperor Hirohito issued a proclamation to the Japanese people that they should accept this decision and honor its terms. That day in Washington, President Harry Truman announced the news of Japan's surrender, signifying an end to hostilities. Crowds of jubilant Americans took to the streets in celebration for a moment they had been waiting for since the attack on Pearl Harbor. Ticker tape, parades, fireworks, and bands overcrowded the streets as families, friends, and strangers marked the occasion across the country. On the morning of September 2, 1945, General Douglas MacArthur, supported by Admiral Chester Nimitz, Admiral Bull Halsey, and several other top American and Allied officers, received 9 Japanese delegates aboard the Pacific Fleet's flagship, the USS Missouri, anchored in Tokyo Bay. 2 copies of the official terms of surrender were signed at a small table on the Missouri's deck by representatives from each warring nation in this theater. This event officially marked the end of the war in the Pacific, popularly known as Victory over Japan Day or VJ Day. After years of long and bloody fighting, with the surrender of Japan, the guns at last fell silent. With its last belligerent defeated, World War II at long last came to an end.
It's 75 years since that halcyon VJ Day. Oh, do I remember it well, even though it was 75 years ago. No, I wasn't overseas at the time. I was at the Army Air Corps base in Apalachicola, Florida. But what a day it was, how we celebrated, and we're celebrating it again today. I do recall, though, all of us then went on to different ways, and among some of the things I did was writing books. One of them was a book of poetry, and one poem in it was a remembrance of that great VJ Day. And I will recite that poem for you now. Here it is. World War II is over. At last it was done. Oh, how we celebrated. Was it ever fun? Soldiers, sailors, airmen, and Marines in our spiffy dress uniforms flooded the scenes. Pretty girls wearing gloves and cute little hats and high-heeled shoes rather than flats greeted us now wherever we'd go, on the streets or in bars or at the USO. And when the band played Little Brown Jug, we'd laugh and we'd flirt and we'd jitterbug. Never since then have we heard anyone sing like Sinatra, Dino, Ella, and Bing. We were young, optimistic, and full of zest. We were up for all challenges, for any test. College days and so much more beckoned us now, and inward we tore. And when those days on campus came to an end, onward we moved toward the road's next bend. Then we got married to that girl we adored, got a job and bought a house we could barely afford. With children, with families, with friends, with delight, we kept surging forward with all of our might. But the years kept passing, and then one day I noticed that my hair was turning gray. So what if I was a little bit older? I just ignored it like the pain in my shoulder. I kept right on enjoying the world that we'd saved from those tyrants so evil and depraved. But now, faster and faster the years go by, and many of my dear pals have said goodbye. And though today's world might consider us old, they should have seen us when we were young and bold. Fewer than 1 million of us still march along, but I'll remember us all 16 million strong. I'll remember us all as World War II buddies, not as some out-of-date fuddy-duddies. I'll remember that time when we went off to war and then returned to a world that was better than before. I'll remember all those with whom I served. The greatest generation, a title deserved. That's it, and I'm going to go celebrate the 75th. So with that, I'll say, off we go into the wild blue yonder, climbing high into the sun.
Hello. As Senator Bob Dole's co-chairman to build the World War II Memorial, it is my honor on the 75th anniversary of VJ Day to pay tribute to the millions of Americans who served and those who built the arsenal of democracy at home. The gold stars on this beautiful monument represent hundreds of thousands of comrades who lost their lives helping defeat the greatest tyrannies in history. The war in the Asia-Pacific theater was particularly brutal and difficult for those who served there. We are forever in the debt of these veterans and must never forget the sacrifices they made for all of us.
Hello, I'm Tom Brokaw, and it is my great personal privilege to participate in this commemoration of VJ Day, the end of the greatest war in the history of mankind. I was just a top, but I was living on an army base at the time, and the extraordinary celebration that erupted across that base and in those small towns of southwestern South Dakota, I knew this was an event that will define my lifetime and the lifetime of everyone who comes after. So we need to be reminded again about what happens when America works together in common cause, because we're going through another kind of war right now, and we need to prevail, because this is an unseen threat. But nonetheless, it is a war that depends on all of us pulling together and finding that great American spirit that has gotten us through so many, many challenges in the past. I'm confident we can do it again. And if we remember the elation of VJ Day and the triumph of the Western nations against the greatest war in the history of mankind, the greatest enemies, we can do it again.
On behalf of the 2.3 million soldiers, sailors, airmen, Marines, and Coast Guardsmen, I want to say thank you to all World War II veterans, living legends of the greatest generation, and their families watching online across the nation and around the world. Patriots like you fought the bloodiest war in human history, and your generation, the greatest generation, that took up arms against tyranny in the Second World War, fought for something. You fought to achieve a better peace. From the ashes of destruction, death, and bloodshed of that war, you established a rules-based global order rooted in political and economic liberty that has maintained Great Power peace for over 7 decades. My father and mother both were part of that generation. My father was with the 4th Marine Division and made the assault landings at Kwajalein, Saipan, Tinian, and Iwo Jima, while my mother served at a Navy hospital in Seattle, taking care of the wounded coming back from the Pacific battles. Although both have passed on, I carry their example of integrity and selfless service as daily inspiration. While my parents served in the Pacific Theater, the Second World War was truly a global conflict. Many others fought across the Atlantic, in North Africa, in Italy, at Normandy, and on the Eastern Front. In fact, in June 1944, as my father hit the beach at Saipan with the Fighting Fourth, his brother was at Normandy on the other side of the world, on the way to liberate Paris from Nazi control. It's an incredible tale of one family's service, and it helps illustrate the scope and scale of the conflict our nation was then fighting, and the sacrifice of every American family during World War II. I often reflect on my parents' service to this nation, and the lessons I take from their example have shaped my view on America's role and place in the world. My parents instilled in me a sense of service and an understanding of how lucky I am to be an American. How lucky I was to grow up in a country where we have freedom of speech, freedom of the press, freedom of religion, and all the other rights and privileges that we as Americans enjoy in our daily lives. Today, those with firsthand knowledge of World War II are becoming fewer and fewer. And so we must never forget the horrific cost of the Great Power War and the sacrifices that went before us. Last year, I had the opportunity to go to the 75th anniversary of the Normandy landings. I was talking to several of the veterans there and asked one of them simply, "What is your lesson from World War II? What is your great lesson here for those of us in uniform today?" He looked up at me and tears came to his eyes and he simply said, "General, never let it happen again. Never let it happen again." As the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, on behalf of all those wearing the cloth of our nation, we extend our sincerest thanks to our World War II veterans for passing on to us the gift of freedom, and we renew our commitment to preserving the peace you established and to protect the Constitution and the values you fought so hard to defend.
Today we remember the people that died during the war in the Pacific and the more than 60 million people lost worldwide, including 400,000 Americans during the deadliest military conflict in human history. They are not forgotten. We are pleased to be joined today by actress-singer, Helen Hayes Award nominee, and recording artist Mary Milben. Mary is an advocate for America's veterans and a spouse to a U.S. Navy veteran. We close now with Mary's special performance of America the Beautiful and God Bless America, in tribute to the 16 million men and women who served with the U.S. Armed Forces during World War II.
For spacious skies, for amber waves of gray, for purple mountain majesties above the fruited plain. Shed his grace on thee and crown thy good with brotherhood from sea to shining sea.
your family. To reap the blessings of hard work. To accomplish dreams. To live securely. To help others. Not by force of government, but by goodness of heart. Where rights are not granted by government or claimed by identities, but are unalienable as members of the human race. Today, America's greatness is challenged by those with extreme notions. Defunding law enforcement as lawlessness abounds. Hateful rhetoric, telling you what to wear and when you can work, limiting free speech and freedom of worship. Old ideas of socialism repackaged in redefined words. Let us restore the values that made America great.
We will make America strong again.
Return to the higher standard.
We will make America proud again.
A land of freedom of speech, of worship.
We will make America safe again.
A land of security and prosperity.
And we will make America great again.
A land of greatness.
From Washington, D.C., welcome to the 2020 Republican National Convention. Tonight, celebrating America as the land of greatness.
Let us pray. Our Heavenly Father, which art in heaven, we thank you for the great bounty you have bestowed on this nation and the many blessings we have received these past 4 years. We are forever grateful. As we come tonight, our country is facing trouble. Tens of thousands are in the path of a deadly storm. The pandemic has gripped millions of hearts with fear. We're divided. We have witnessed injustice. Anger and despair have flowed into the streets. We need your help. We need to hear your voice at this crucial hour. We ask that you would unite our hearts to be one nation under God, for you are our only hope. We declare today our total dependence upon you and our need of repentance as a people. I thank you tonight for our President, Donald J. Trump. We pray that you would give him wisdom from on high, clarity of vision, and strength as he leads this nation forward. Bless him. We pray for our First Lady, Melania, their son, Barron, and all of the family. Protect them and keep them strong and safe. We thank you for Vice President Mike Pence, for his steady hand and clear voice. We pray for Second Lady Karen Pence and their family. Father, we know that you can make this nation great once again if we turn our eyes and our hearts to you and follow your word in obedience. May your will be done on this earth as it is in heaven. And we pray this in the mighty name of your Son, my Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ. Amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
As Americans, we carve our own destiny. As Americans, we look forward, not backward. Our ancestors braved the unknown. They built this nation, brick by brick. They lifted up millions from poverty, hunger, and disease. They vanquished fascism and communism. A great nation because of great people. And no one has done more to protect and advance it than President Trump. As Republicans, we are proud to stand with him and to work for you. Together, we built the greatest economy the world has ever seen, and we will do it again. We confronted China head on, tore up bad trade deals and made better ones, supported our men and women in uniform, and took out the world's top terrorists, achieved energy independence, defended the sanctity of life, and restored law and order at the border. But as every American knows, we face an invisible enemy that we didn't ask for nor invite, but we will defeat it. We will defeat it because America is where innovation happens, and we are developing a vaccine in record time. We will defeat it because President Trump unleashed a Marshall Plan for Main Street and put hardworking taxpayers back on their feet. We will defeat it because tough times don't last. Tough Americans do. And that is what this election is all about. You, not us. Joe Biden and Kamala Harris think this election is about the government. They're wrong. It's about your family and your future. And to secure what really matters, we will call on the bedrock of what makes us the greatest country in the world, the American promise. A promise that everyone is equal under God, under the Constitution and under the law. A promise that government is accountable to we the people. A promise that if you work hard and play by the rules, your opportunities are endless. As Republicans, it's our mission to renew the American dream, restore our way of life, and rebuild the greatest economy in the world. The Socialist Democrats have a different agenda. They will dismantle our institutions, defund our police, and destroy our economy. So as you cast your vote this November, remember this. 4 years ago, President Trump promised to be your voice. He kept that promise, but there's still so much more to do. The choice before you could not be clearer. Forward in freedom or backward in socialism. Forward in prosperity or backward in poverty. Forward in personal liberty or backwards in more government control. I know which direction I'm headed. Join us, as the best is yet to come.
Hello, my name is Jerron Smith. 20 years ago, I moved to Washington, D.C. to attend Howard University. I was at a crossroads, just like America is today. I grew up on Strand Hill Road in Cleveland, a blue-collar street in a blue-collar city. When the media talks about forgotten places or working-class people who are overlooked and struggling hard, there's usually some stock photo of people who don't look like me. They never seem to show people like my mom, who worked 2 jobs as a gas station clerk, and a mom. She showed me how to persevere. They never seem to show people like my dad, who plowed snow in the winter and paved streets in the summer, who stood by me through thick and thin and taught me strong values every day. They never seem to show people like me. At first, I didn't live the values my parents taught me. I won a starting spot on the varsity football team, but I only had a 1.9 GPA. But then I broke my leg. It took a broken leg for me to really get moving in life. I prioritized schoolwork, went to Howard, and ended up working for the President of the United States. Growing up, I'd never really known a Republican. I believed all the stereotypes. It took a meeting Republicans who shared my values to show me I was wrong. Donald Trump knows that in the work of revitalizing communities, America's strength is America's people. And I can tell you, he really cares. And he takes action. Every issue important to Black communities has been a priority for him. Prison reform, rebuilding broken families, bringing jobs back to America. Jobs in Cleveland, jobs in Detroit, jobs in Milwaukee. President Trump knows that education is the great equalizer. That's why he secured record and permanent funding for historically Black colleges and universities, and is fighting hard for school choice. In the wake of the murder of Ahmaud Arbery, George Floyd, and legend Taliaferro, a moment of national racial consciousness, I have seen his true conscience. I just wish everyone could see the deep empathy he shows to families whose loved ones were killed in senseless violence. President Trump has made it clear that if you want safe communities, you must have police departments with the highest standards. I'll never forget Strand Hill Road or the people of Cleveland. They're tough, smart, and tell it like it is. That's President Trump. For a New Yorker, he's got a lot of Cleveland heart. And I'm proud to say that he's my president. God bless America.
People assume that if I'm not a Democrat anymore, then I must be a Republican or I must be conservative. I still consider myself a liberal, but liberalism has changed, and I don't fit there anymore.
As a Black kid growing up in Texas, you were taught that you had to support Democrats because Republicans were for white people, supporting the rich, and we definitely weren't rich.
Basically, our default setting is to be a Democrat.
I'm a Democrat. My parents are Democrats. I was a huge Obama supporter.
In the 2016 primary, I voted for Bernie Sanders.
I mean, I was a socialist. It wasn't until we got married and began expecting our own family that I began to kind of question whether or not the things that we were really promoting and supporting were in line with the way we were living. And that was when the shift kind of began for us.
I was renting a room in this woman's apartment. She had 3 or 4 kids from 3 or 4 different fathers. She was my age. Most of them were incarcerated. I asked her, "What do you do?" And she goes, "I'm in the system." It feels like Democrats sort of get people hooked on this drug of free money, where they basically say, if you want your fix, you have to keep voting for us.
And then this bold man comes down an escalator in New York City. I couldn't come out and say it right away, but deep down inside, I knew it was going to be the first Republican that I ever voted for.
His entire campaign, Worse for All Americans, that was a turning point for me. One of the hardest things to do is to challenge your own beliefs. Going straight to the source is really how I was able to overcome some of those pitfalls. And so I want people to hear my story and know that you can actually go from being a Democratic socialist to a Trump supporter, but you have to look deeper.
I think there's a political realignment that's taking place. I've always been very anti-war, and now Trump is by a mile the anti-war candidate. I've always been very much for free speech. Trump is now by a mile the more pro-free speech candidate.
What's at stake in November is pretty much everywhere you look. You either see prosperity and liberty and things that you want to preserve, or if you're a Democrat, everywhere you look, you see something you want to tear down and remake in the image of some other country that's not as successful as we are.
I'm trying to conserve our values, our Constitution, our God-given rights. right to bear arms, freedom of speech, all the things that has always made this country great.
You know, it took me a good long time to get here, but I hope that Trump wins and that we can continue with the progress that he's made and the policies that he's put into place. Let's get our economy back on track and let's be moving in the right direction.
Good evening. My name is Jeff Van Drew. I speak to you as a member of the Republican Party, but it always wasn't that way. How I became a Republican says a lot about today's Democratic Party. I'm from South Jersey, where we work hard, look after our neighbors, and care about our communities. Years ago, I was a local dentist and was asked by the Democrats to run for a town council seat. I had my doubts, and I explained that my views were middle of the road to conservative, but the local leaders said the Democratic Party was a big tent and that they accepted people like me. I was elected to council as a Democrat, but as I won seats for county office, state legislature, and then Congress, I noticed things were changing. The Democratic Party had become less accepting of American tradition, less believing in American exceptionalism, less supportive of traditional faith and family. This was not the party that I knew. In 2018, after being elected to Congress as a Democrat, I was already uncomfortable with a San Francisco liberal running the House, which is why my first vote in Congress was cast against Nancy Pelosi for Speaker. But imagine how I felt after seeing members of the squad quickly take control of the Democratic Party just weeks after being elected. The party had moved from liberal to radical. This new Democratic Party wasn't just for higher taxes. Now they were for open borders, against our police, and against our God-given rights. When the radical Democrats went after President Trump with impeachment, they made another mistake. Democratic leaders told me that I had to vote for impeachment or my life would be made difficult, and I wouldn't be allowed to run again. Listen, I'm from South Jersey, and you better come at me with more than just loud words and empty threats. I voted no on impeachment, and it was an easy call. Soon after, I met with President Trump, and he made me feel more comfortable and welcome in the Oval Office than Nancy Pelosi ever made me feel in her caucus. And a few days later, I officially changed parties, and I became a Republican. Let me tell you about Joe Biden. When the Democrats tried to order me around, I was ready, willing, and able to say, I've had enough with their radical socialist agenda. Do you really believe Joe Biden is ready, willing, and most of all, able to do the same? As Joe says, come on, man. Joe Biden is being told what to do by the radicals running my former party, the same radicals trying to install him as their puppet president. When I'm at my local diner, I tell people that America is the best nation in the world and that President Trump has helped make it that way. Republicans, independents, and even Democrats, they all know that in President Trump's America, we have a strong military, strong support for our police, strong support for our veterans, and strong support for our seniors. In President Trump's America, we have a strong supply chain, good schools, we're energy independent, and we protect our environment. There are a lot of Democrats who support our president and are disgusted for what their old party, what my old party, has become. Here's my advice. Be true to who you are now, not who the Democrats used to be. That's why I'm a proud Republican and why I will be voting for Donald Trump. Thank you. And may God bless you, God bless our president, and God bless the United States of America.
For me, the most important issue is jobs. We need to be able to pay our bills. I trust Donald Trump on jobs way more. than I do Joe Biden. There's no doubt that Donald Trump has built the strongest economy we've ever seen, and I know that he will do it again. Joe Biden doesn't have the energy, and his ideas like raising taxes, it's going to hurt us. Electing Joe Biden as the president is a huge risk, and I don't want the future of my son in the hands of Joe Biden. I want my son to be able to go out and get a good education. I want the economy to be strong. I want the country that he lives in to be safe. And I want our borders to be secure. And I don't want that in Joe Biden's hands. Donald Trump has built the strongest economy we've ever seen. He has made our country safe. And as a mom, those are things that I'm very proud of. And those are things that are very important to me when I'm looking for a president. I'm sticking with Donald Trump.
My name is Stacia Brightman. I'm a single mother of 2 boys, and I work in Houston, Texas for S&B Engineers and Constructors as a warehouse receiving clerk. After serving my country in the Marine Corps, I worked various jobs, but I thought I needed a degree in order to have a career. I put myself into significant debt to earn my bachelor's degree in finance. Despite my degree and all of my efforts, at one point, my boys and I even found ourselves homeless. After being laid off yet again, I received an email from the Texas Workforce Commission about S&B's Women in Construction Earn While You Learn apprenticeship program. I thought I'd give it a try. I was a bit skeptical at first, but I said to myself, hey, if they're willing to take a chance on me, I should be willing to take a chance on myself. At the start of the program, I was making $16 an hour while I trained to become a pipe fitter helper. Looking back, it wasn't easy, but boy, was it worth it. I felt empowered that I was learning new skills and able to support my family again. I worked hard, got promoted, and even got a few raises. Later, I learned what President Donald Trump and Ivanka Trump were doing behind the scenes to make sure that people like me and you had a chance to rise up and succeed. President Trump started the National Council for the American Worker and the American Workforce Policy Advisory Board. Together with Ivanka, he wrote policies that made it easy for states and companies to give opportunities to hardworking Americans like me. The President and Ivanka also partnered with the Ad Council to launch FindSomethingNew.org, helping to connect workers and workers with training and apprenticeship programs where they live. If you find yourself in a situation like mine, where you feel you have nowhere to turn, nothing to really fall back on, and you feel like no one believes in you, go online to FindSomethingNew.org and see that President Trump believes in you. And more importantly, please believe in yourself. Keep trying, keep pushing. Times will get hard. Remember, just a few years ago, I was homeless. And you know what now? I'm set to close on a brand new home at the end of the month. So my message to you is keep pushing. You can do it. Find a training program like the one I participated in. And like me, you'll have an opportunity to build a career in life that you're proud of. So with that being said, I'd like to talk to you about a different kind of training. This is the Trump campaign's National Week of Volunteer Training. If you're like me, you know how important it is to put Americans back to work. So get trained and get involved with the campaign. Go online to www.trumpvictory.com and sign up and keep the president fighting for you for another 4 years. Thank you and God bless.
My name is Dan Scavino. When I was 16 years old, I got a part-time job at a golf course just outside of New York City. One day, I was cleaning golf clubs when a man pulled into the parking lot. There wasn't a single person who didn't know who it was. Everyone's jaws were on the ground. It was Donald Trump. All I could think was, nobody will ever believe this at school tomorrow. I never would have imagined it at this moment, but I've now been at President Trump's side for almost 30 years. All these years later, there's a part of me that still feels a sense of wonder every day when I consider the journey we have taken together and taken with so many of you watching tonight. Because my personal story with Donald Trump, in so many ways, is yours too. He saw potential in me, a spark, the possibility that I could be more, do more, and achieve more than even I thought was possible. That's how he views this country, too. We have all just scratched the surface of what we can do together. If there's one thing I hope you will hear from me tonight, it is this. President Trump is a kind and decent man. I wish you could be at his side with me to see his endless kindness to everyone he meets. The media could be a fog machine, creating a partisan mist around everything that's hard to see through. But in 2016, you navigated through it all. You found your way through the swamp, and you arrived safely on the other side, with Donald J. Trump as your new president. There are some things that were true then, reasons why you choose him as your country's leader, that remain true today. You know, the president cannot be bought. The American people must know their president isn't building his life. He's building yours. He knows the president cannot be bullied. President Trump is the first leader who's been too strong, too tough, and too savvy to be crushed by the status quo establishment and the political media class. You know, the president cannot be beaten. He's got a fighting spirit, like so many of you do. And winning for America is what he does. While they call it chaos, President Trump calls it change. Just think about what we achieved together with President Trump. The strongest economy in history, the lowest unemployment rate for almost all demographic groups, Black Americans, Hispanic Americans, women, and so many more. He did that once, and he will do it again. You know it, and I know it. We all just need somebody to believe in our capacity to do great things. Donald Trump believed in me when I was a teenage golf caddy, and he was already one of the wealthiest, most famous people on the entire planet. He saw my potential, even when I couldn't. He sees greatness in our country, too, and in each of you. He believes the world you dream about at night can be yours. He truly is a man of the people. Just think about what he has done with this convention. You've heard from real Americans with real stories. People who are just like us. People whose lives have been forever impacted by the president and his policies. You've heard from people like John Peterson, who has a factory in Ohio. Tanya Weinreich, who has a small business in Montana. Jason Joyce, a fisherman from Maine. And Chris Peterson, a dairy farmer from Wisconsin. You've seen a man who turned his life around get a second chance with a presidential pardon. You've seen brand new Americans become our fellow citizens in a ceremony at the White House. You felt the passion of pro-life and religious freedom advocates, and listened to the heartfelt words of a man whose family fled communism and oppression. Who needs a nonstop parade of politicians when you got an army of the people behind you? On November 3rd, vote for the man who believes in America and believes in you. Vote for my friend, your friend, our friend, Donald J. Trump. Thank you, and God bless the United States of America.
Good evening. It's an honor to come before you tonight from the Commonwealth of Kentucky. As the only leader in Washington not from either New York or California, I consider it my responsibility to look out for Middle America. This election is incredibly consequential for Middle America. President Trump knows he inherited the first generation of Americans who couldn't promise their children a better life than their own. He's made it his mission of this administration to change that. I know because I work beside him every day. Today's Democrat Party doesn't want to improve life for Middle America. They prefer that all of us in flyover country keep quiet and let them decide how we should live our lives. They want to tell you when you can go to work, when your kids can go to school. They want to tax your job out of existence and then send you a government check for unemployment. They want to tell you what kind of car you can drive, what sources of information are credible, and even how many hamburgers you can eat. They want to defund the police and take away your Second Amendment rights. They want free health care for illegal immigrants, yet they offer no protection at all for unborn Americans. They want to pack the Supreme Court with liberals intent on eroding our constitutional rights. And they want to codify all this by making the swamp itself, Washington, D.C., America's 51st state. With 2 more liberal senators, we cannot undo the damage they've done. Now you understand why Democrats spent an entire week telling us about who Joe Biden is, not what he intends to do. I'm immensely proud of the work the Republican Senate has done. We are the firewall against Nancy Pelosi's agenda. Like President Trump, we won't be bullied by a liberal media intent on destroying America's institutions. We will stand our post on behalf of the millions of Americans whose stories aren't told in today's newspapers, whose struggles are just as real. We'll continue to support American families as we defeat the coronavirus and return our economy to the envy of the world. The stakes have never been higher, which is why I'm asking you to support Republican Senate candidates across the country and re-elect my friend, President Donald Trump.
So all of these titans of American sport know that many of life's most valuable lessons are learned on the field of competition, and the ability to overcome adversity.
But I might have been given a bad grade, but I've got an awful lot to live for.
And your relentless will to win, win, win. These qualities embody the American spirit of pushing boundaries, defying limits.
It's a game cast in sports immortality.
And always striving for greatness. You stayed in the fight. You finished the fight. Often bumpy roads lead to beautiful places. This great building is celebrating great people. And your winners all.
Would you please rise for the playing of our national anthem?
It's our honor to be in the company of great, great champions.
Team USA will indeed take home the gold.
We have to get our sports back. We can't wait to see what's next. Never give up, never lose faith, never ever quit. Just keep forging ahead. To give everything you've got. Victory is always within reach.
Hey everyone, I am Dana White, the president of the UFC. Many of you know who I am, what I do, and that I am friends with the president. I spoke at this convention 4 years ago, and I'm back because I believe we need President Trump's leadership now more than ever. Before the pandemic, President Trump built the greatest economy in our nation's history and created opportunities for all Americans like no one before him. Financial markets hit all-time highs, unemployment was at an all-time low, and we weren't facing the lawless destruction that now is occurring in a few of our great cities. It blows my mind how quickly some of the leadership in this country has forgotten the critical role first responders play in our society. Police departments and other law enforcement, even some fire departments, have faced opposition from many in this country. But they are always the people who are asked to step up when things are at their worst and put themselves at risk. That has certainly been the case during this ongoing pandemic. Come on, America. Defunding these vital positions is not the answer. The first responders have always taken care of us. And now, more than ever, we need to take care of them. Now, let's talk about COVID. And let's be very honest about it. No one person and no one place could have anticipated the challenges that COVID would bring. But President Trump has faced all these obstacles head on. He immediately put protective measures in place, and he reached out to the best and the brightest leading American businesses across all industries to discuss what he and his administration could do to get the economy back up and running safely. Let me give you more detail. In early April, President Trump organized a task force of business leaders across the country, and I was fortunate enough to serve on that task force. Firsthand, I had the opportunity to witness how hardworking and determined President Trump was to solve unprecedented problems our country was facing. I personally observed his ability to listen and understand the issues impacting Americans of all backgrounds. It was clear his highest priority was always the health and safety of everyone in our country. Not just Republicans, not just supporters, but every single American. President Trump recognized that one of the small ways to instill a sense of normalcy in people's lives was to bring back entertainment options. The president went above and beyond to help all sports leagues involved figure out a way to overcome the challenges of staging live professional sporting events in the middle of a pandemic. And you know what? We did it. The UFC was the first to do it, and we are continuing to do it. Now, other sports have joined us, and some of the lessons learned are being used to help reopen other types of businesses and schools. Make no mistake about it, we still have a long way to go, and that is why we need a leader with President Trump's unique attributes at this critical time. I have said it before, and I will say it again. He is one of the most loyal human beings I have ever met. The man has unstoppable energy. No one, and I mean no one, is going to outwork this guy. But most importantly, he truly loves and believes in our country. He believes in the people of this country. America is a place everyone wants a solid job. They want to take care of their family. They want to support the community, assist the less fortunate, and enjoy the freedom this country has provided to all of us. While we have certainly experienced a ton of negativity in 2020, President Trump's mindset is to work tirelessly to find solutions to problems and help restore America. He did it once, and I'm telling you right now, he will do it again. And remember, President Trump may be the only president in modern times who has actually done everything he said he would do during his campaign. There's this quote that I love from Ronald Reagan, where he said, "There isn't any problem we can't solve if government will give us the facts, tell us what needs to be done, then get out of the way and let us have at it." And what that means to me is, as Americans, we work hard to overcome adversity, and we face the tough times head on, irrespective of your gender, race, religion, or sexual orientation. What unites us as a nation is freedom, equality, and opportunity. That's what it means to be an American. Ladies and gentlemen, let's re-elect President Trump. Let's figure out what the problems are and continue to find solutions to those problems. Then let's get to work. I'd like to close with this. While it's critically important to re-elect President Trump, this pandemic has also taught us to be very, very careful who you select as your next governor, senator, congressperson, and mayor. It is so important to vote. And don't think that your vote doesn't matter, because to be honest with you, it has never mattered more than it does right now. Thank you, and have a great evening, America.
Buenas tardes, konbanwa, magandang gabi po, aloha, and good evening. I'm Utah Attorney General Sean Reyes. I'm a proud American and proud descendant of warrior ancestors, women and men alike, from my Hawaiian, Filipino, Japanese, and Spanish heritage. My father demonstrated his warrior spirit over 50 years ago, fighting a dictator in his homeland, the Philippines. Barely escaping with his life, he started anew in America. He arrived with nothing but faith, determination, and a willingness to work hard. He lived the American dream, building businesses, a family, and seeing me become Utah's first minority statewide elected official. Today, I channel my warrior roots by battling human trafficking. I've been able to lead some of the largest trafficking prosecutions in America and traveled to foreign countries, working with law enforcement and NGOs to dismantle trafficking networks and rescue people from the most brutal conditions imaginable. Young girls and women sold into sex slavery, young boys and men forced into labor servitude, illegal adoptions, organ harvesting, human life utterly debased. President Donald Trump is a fierce warrior against human trafficking. How do I know? Early in 2017, I had occasion to visit with him about our rescues. He asked insightful questions, expressed deep concern for victims. Overwhelmed with compassion, he promised to attack this evil. President Trump summoned Ivanka and leaders from his cabinet, directing resources and hundreds of millions of dollars for raising awareness, liberating victims, prosecuting predators, and empowering survivors. Together, they've done more to combat human trafficking than any administration in modern history. Now that's a promise kept. President Trump's taken similar aggressive action to break the chains of drug addiction and improve mental and behavioral health. He declared the opioid epidemic a national public health emergency and made available billions of dollars to confront this threat. He also signed a bill creating a phone number like 911, but for mental health. When activated, 988 will be a lifeline for those struggling with thoughts of suicide, depression, addiction, self-harm, or even hurting others. It will save countless American lives. A few months ago, my father, my warrior hero, lost his fight with cancer. When he passed, he had by his bedside his scriptures, family photos, and a pen President Trump gave me to give him. Dad loved that pen. It represented freedom to him, the freedom that only exists when someone is willing to fight for it. To my father, President Trump is that ultimate warrior fighting for our freedom. If you listen to Democrats, the media, and liberal elite, they will tell you that America's light doesn't shine as brightly around the world as it once did. That is simply not true. The same light that brought my father to America inspires the desperate and downtrodden equally today. Believe me, I interact with some of the most marginalized victims on earth, and they love America. They love President Trump because he's fighting for their freedom and America's freedom. Thank you, President Trump. God bless you, and God bless America, this land of greatness.
My name is Debbie Flood, and I own a small foundry and machine shop in Wisconsin that manufactures cast bronze architectural hardware. My father, who was a World War II veteran, started the business with some used equipment and the American dream. Today, we are one of the only U.S. companies left who make our products from start to finish under one roof. We really make things, and we love it. When we lost nearly 50% of our business to China in the mid-2000s, we wondered how a small company like ours could continue to compete. At that time, Joe Biden was a senator. He voted to normalize trade with China and helped pave the way for them to join the WTO, even though they were hurting American companies like ours. But we're tenacious and we're creative. We took a risk and purchased a 3D printer. 3D printing technology allows us to do things that China can't. Now we can take a customer's idea from sketch to sample to production in just a few weeks. This opened up new opportunities for us. Later, we fought our way through the Great Recession. Then Donald Trump was elected, and we breathed a sigh of relief. He actually fought for American workers and American craftsmen. He actually cared about bringing back those three beautiful words, made in America. We no longer had to succeed despite government. Now the government was on our side. We enjoyed a thriving economy stimulated by President Trump's pro-business and pro-worker policies. Thanks to the Trump tax cuts, I've been able to raise my employees' wages, so they got a pay raise and a tax cut. Even in the face of the pandemic, the president doubled down on his support for business. Thanks to President Trump, our business was approved for the Paycheck Protection Program. That allowed us to keep our people working at a time when the future was very uncertain. Our president understands that the best solutions unleash the innovation of American entrepreneurs and the creativity of American workers. Joe Biden doesn't really know anything about business or creating jobs. He spent 47 years in government, and it's doubtful that he'll finally figure it out in year 48. He's pledged to raise our taxes and bring back excessive regulation. I own a business whose mission it is to solve problems. Anything can be solved with a little creativity. It takes courage, commitment, and ideas. And those are all things that come naturally to President Trump. And that's why he has my support.
My name is Judy Smith.
My name is Manuel Martinez.
My name is Claudia Perez.
I live in New York City Public Housing.
I'm the resident council president for South Jamaica Houses.
I am resident council president of Washington Houses, which is in Spanish Harlem.
My name is Carmen Quinones, and I'm the president of Douglas Houses, 3,500 strong residents here. And I am a lifelong Democrat. I would really hate to get started on this mayor.
Bill de Blasio and the way he has dealt with public housing residents is disgraceful.
This mayor has made our lives here, and I think every housing development, very uncomfortable.
Under the Trump administration, New York City Housing Authority has received an influx of cash that it has not seen since 1997.
I'm grateful for the spotlight that President Trump is putting on New York City public housing. I think it's wrong that the Democrats put illegal immigrants before Black Americans. How is it that we have people waiting on the waiting list for New York City public housing for 10 years or more, but yet we have illegal immigrants living here? Something is wrong with that picture.
Since HUD came in with Lynn Patton as the regional director for HUD, it helped us identify some long systemic problems that we are now putting on the table and having discussions on.
President Trump's administration have opened their ear and have listened. There's been improvement in public housing. We're very appreciative of this administration that has come and finally shined a light on what's going on and bringing real solutions to a real problem.
Hello, my name is Ann Dorn. I'd like to introduce you to my husband, David, father of 5, brother of 12, grandfather of 10, friend to thousands. He was the most kind, dedicated, loving life partner I could have hoped for. He had a big smile and a heart to match. He was blessed with the gift of gab, and that gift enabled him to touch souls and inspire people, especially young people. Oh, how kids loved him, and they really loved him back. Dave was all about service. He served 38 years in the St. Louis Metropolitan Police Department and 6 years as Chief of Police as the Moline Acres Police Department. After 44 years, he retired from law enforcement, but he never retired from helping a friend in need. Since he befriended every person he met, he was a very busy man. One example of that was his friendship with a young man named Lee. David met him when Lee was just a kid, after members of his family were attacked and murdered. Dave took a special interest in the boy. They bonded and their friendship grew and remained strong throughout the years. Lee eventually opened a pawn shop. He trusted Dave implicitly and asked Dave to help with security. David readily agreed. Whenever the shop's alarm would go off, the alarm company called Dave. He would investigate. If he got a call after I went to bed, he would wake me up and tell me he was going to Lee's, just to make sure everything was all right. Most of the time they were false alarms, triggered by a storm or animals. But I never rested easily until I heard Dave's key turn in the door, knowing he was home safe. The alarm that went off the morning of June 2nd was for real. It was a violent night in St. Louis. 4 officers were shot. Others were hit with rocks and fireworks. At least 5 businesses were damaged, looted, or set on fire. As the Officer Wellness Coordinator and CIT Coordinator with the police department, I was keenly aware of the rioting and spent the evening getting ready to mobilize support for officers who were impacted. After I'd gone to bed, David received a call from Lee's alarm company. The front door of the pawn shop had been breached. This time he didn't wake me up to tell me. He probably knew I would have tried to stop him or insist on going with him. As I slept, looters were ransacking the shop. They shot and killed David in cold blood, and then live streamed his execution and his last moments on earth. David's grandson was watching the video on Facebook in real time, not realizing he was watching his own grandfather dying on the sidewalk. I learned of all this around 4 a.m. when our doorbell rang. The chief of police was standing outside. I wondered why Dave had not answered the door. It wasn't uncommon for him to be up watching TV at this time. I called out to him several times. There was no reply. He just wasn't there. I let in the chief, and fighting back tears, he uttered the words every officer's spouse dreads. I relive that horror in my mind every single day. My hope is that having you relive it with me now will help shake this country from this nightmare we are witnessing in our cities and bring about positive, peaceful change. How do we get to this point where so many young people are callous and indifferent towards human life? This isn't a video game where you can commit mayhem and then just hit reset and bring all the characters back to life. David is never coming back to me. He was murdered by people who didn't know and just didn't care. He would have done anything to help them. Violence and destruction are not legitimate forms of protest. They do not safeguard Black lives. They only destroy them. President Trump understands this, has offered federal help to restore order in our communities. In a time when police departments are short on resources and manpower, we need that help. We should accept that help. We must heal before we can affect change, but we cannot heal amid devastation and chaos. President Trump knows we need more Davids in our communities, not fewer. We need to come together in peace and remember that every life is precious.
Good evening. I'm Ben Carson, a retired neurosurgeon and a public servant. Before I begin, I'd like to say that our hearts go out to the Blake family and the other families who've been impacted by the tragic events in Kenosha. As Jacob's mother has urged the country, let's use our hearts. our love, and our intelligence to work together to show the rest of the world how humans are supposed to treat each other. America is great when we behave greatly. In order to succeed in change, we must first come together in love of our fellow citizens. History reminds us that necessary change comes through hope and love, not senseless and destructive violence. Abraham Lincoln once said to an America divided that, quote, "Your purpose then, plainly stated, is that you will destroy the government unless you be allowed to construe and enforce the Constitution as you please on all points in dispute between you and us. You will rule or ruin in all events," unquote. These words of warning are relevant today. We have a choice. Do we want big government that controls our lives from cradle to grave? Or do we believe in the power and wisdom of the people and their ability to self-govern with help from a limited federal government? Our president, Donald J. Trump, believes in the people. He is one of us. He makes promises and he keeps them. He is transparent, and we certainly know what he's thinking. He does not submit to political correctness or to its enforcers, the media. He is real. Right now, we need real. We need courage. We can't cower in the corner and hope that no one calls us a name, believing that will keep us safe. That is not courage, and that will not lead us to a good and just place. We must remember all those who sacrificed everything in order to give us freedom, and we must be willing to do the same for those who come after us. President Trump does not dabble in identity politics. He wants everyone to succeed and believes in the adage, "A rising tide lifts all boats." Many on the other side love to incite division by claiming that President Trump is a racist. They could not be more wrong. Years ago, Jesse Jackson gave Donald Trump an award for the economic opportunities he created for black people. In Palm Beach, Florida, Donald Trump led the crusade to allow blacks and Jews into private clubs and resorts. One of the first things he did as president was bring the Office of Historically Black Colleges and Universities into the White House so that it could get proper attention and financial support. Before the pandemic, African American unemployment was at an all-time low. President Trump accomplished prison reform. He created incentives to encourage investors to become involved with economically deprived areas of America. He strongly supports school choice, fully recognizing that no matter what circumstances a person is born into, they can achieve success with a good education. It was true for me. When my mother forced me to read books about doctors, entrepreneurs, inventors, and scientists, I began to recognize that the person who has the most to do with what happens to you in life is you. My mother always told me, "Ben, you can do anything, but I will never allow you to become a victim." It was then that I stopped listening to the people who were trying to convince me that I was a victim and that others were responsible for my victimhood. What is racist is the fact that African Americans have the highest abortion rate. President Trump is the most pro-life president in the country's history. He will continue to fight for those who cannot yet speak. The vision of a shining city upon a hill came from Jesus' Sermon on the Mount. America is that shiny city. We are the beacon of hope for the world. At this moment in time, President Donald Trump is the man with the courage, the vision, and the ability to keep it shining brightly.
I'm Pat Lynch, president of the Police Benevolent Association, speaking to you on behalf of 50,000 active and retired New York City police officers. We are the proud men and women who wear a shield on our chest and put ourselves in harm's way to protect our city. We are proud to endorse our president, Donald J. Trump, for re-election because the stakes have never been higher. Like cops across the country, we are staring down the barrel of a public safety disaster. More than 1,000 people have been shot in New York City so far this year. Almost 300 have been killed. These are not just numbers. These are real people. A father gunned down while holding his 7-year-old daughter's hand. A beloved neighborhood peacemaker killed by a stray bullet. A 17-year-old who made all the right choices, who worked hard to go to college and earned a sports scholarship, murdered before he can tell his mother the news. A 1-year-old child shot dead in his stroller. Innocent people, innocent lives lost. One tragedy is too many, but every day the number keeps growing. And every day our communities are asking us, why is this happening? The answer is simple. The Democrats have walked away from us. They have walked away from police officers, and they've walked away from the innocent people we protect. Democratic politicians have surrendered our streets and our institutions. The loudest voices have taken control, and our so-called leaders are scrambling to catch up with them. In city after city, they've slashed police budgets. They have hijacked and dismantled the criminal justice system. They've passed laws that made it impossible for police officers to do our job effectively. Here's the sad truth that every cop in this country knows. The violence and chaos we're seeing now isn't a side effect. It isn't an unintended consequence. It's actually the goal. The radical left doesn't really want better policing. They don't really care about making the justice system fairer. What they want is no policing. What they want is a justice system that just stops working altogether. In places where Democrats are in power, the radical left is getting exactly what they want, and our country is suffering for it. I've been a New York City police officer for 36 years. I've spent 21 of those years protecting the cops who protect New Yorkers. I've never seen our streets go this bad so quickly. I've never heard from so many cops from every corner of the country who are saying the same thing. Our hands are tied. If we're going to turn the tide and restore law and order, we cannot fall into the left's trap. There is nobody who hates bad cops more than good cops. But that doesn't matter to the radical left. To them, we're all just bad because we're all just blue. Their anti-law enforcement campaign isn't about a single incident. It isn't the result of one bad law or one bad policy. It's about a message. The message is police officers are the enemy. The message is criminals have the right to resist arrest. The message is if you commit a crime, if you victimize the most vulnerable of people, the justice system will not hold you accountable. That's the message echoing through city halls and state houses across our country. It's playing on a loop in the media. The criminals have heard that message, and they're taking full advantage. We must stop that message. We must expose the left's lies about police officers and the job that we do. And we will do that because we have something that they don't. We have a real leader. We have a powerful voice in the most powerful office in our country. We have President Donald J. Trump. Unlike the Democrats who are running in fear of the mob in the street, President Trump has never apologized for supporting police officers and standing up for law and order. Unlike the Democrats who froze in the face of rioting and looting, President Trump matches his words with his actions. He gives law enforcement the support and the tools we need to go out there and put a stop to it, period. End of story. It has never been harder to be a police officer in this country, but there are two things that keep us going. We look at the victims, the vulnerable, the regular working people who count on us. We keep strapping on our duty belts and bullet-resistant vests because we know we can't let them down. And while we do that, we hear the words of our president, who says to police officers everywhere, I will never let you down. We know that he hasn't, and we know that he won't. We've been fortunate to have him in office these past 4 years, and we know that we cannot afford to lose him. When it comes to your safety, your family's safety, and the safety of all Americans, there's no other choice. You won't be safe in Joe Biden's America. We can have 4 more years of President Trump, or you can have no safety, no justice, and no peace.
Good evening. My name is Rudy Giuliani, and I'm the former mayor of New York City. In 2013, my city elected a self-described progressive Democrat as mayor. New York City, once described as America's crime capital, had become, by the mid-1990s, America's safest large city. Now today, my city is in shock. Murders, shootings, and violent crime are increasing at percentages unheard of in the past. We're seeing the return of rioting and looting. During riots, this Democrat mayor, like others, has often prevented the police from making arrests. And even when arrests are made, liberal, progressive DAs release the rioters so as not to disrupt the rioting. New Yorkers wonder, how did we get overwhelmed by crime so quickly and decline so fast? Don't let Democrats do to America what they have done to New York. Again, the Democrats are urging you to vote for an obviously defective candidate. Biden has changed his principles so often, he no longer has any principles. He's a Trojan horse with Bernie, AOC, Pelosi, Black Lives Matter, and his party's entire left wing, just waiting to execute their pro-criminal, anti-police socialist policies. The whole unprecedented wave of lawlessness began with a truly just cause: the unforgivable police killing of George Floyd in Minneapolis. Peaceful protests began all over the land. The condemnation of the killing was universal, from President Trump to Democrat leaders. It seemed, for a few brief shining moments, Democrat and Republican leaders would come together with a unified proposal to reduce police misconduct. This possibility was very dangerous to the left. They had a president to beat and a country to destroy. And although an agreement on action against police brutality would be very valuable for the country, it would also make President Trump appear to be an effective leader. They could have none of that. So Black Lives Matter and Antifa sprang into action, and in a flash, they hijacked the peaceful protests into vicious, brutal riots. Soon protests turned into riots in many other American cities, almost all Democrat. Businesses were burned and crushed, people beaten, shot and killed, police officers routinely assaulted, badly beaten, and occasionally murdered. And the police handcuffed by progressive Democrat mayors from doing anything but observe the crimes and absorb the blows. But the worst of it was the slaughter of innocent young people with their whole lives ahead of them. The murder of 4-year-old Legrand Talfero in Kansas City shocked the nation, but not Black Lives Matter or their many Democrat supporters. 17-year-old basketball star Brandon Hendricks was killed in the Bronx just days after graduating high school and on his way to St. John's to play basketball. He passed with only a brief mention. 1-year-old Davil Gardner Jr. was shot and killed in a stroller at a cookout in Brooklyn, and it caused no outrage. For President Trump and for us Republicans, all Black lives matter.